succeed, and really it was an awful, awful time. Neighborhood councils were born of that crisis, and I think have really moved the city in the right direction as far as democratizing the leadership of the city to a large extent, but we have very far to go. So now we're facing, obviously, a tremendous crisis situation once again. And to me, this is exactly the time when the city needs to be leaning more upon neighborhood councils for your input and for your help and for the service that you provide and for being the eyes and ears that we need and for being the voices of our communities. This is exactly the wrong time to try to turn the tide back, as some in the city would try to do if given the opportunity. Let's be straight about that. I'm very fortunate to come into this job at this time and to be able to chair the Education and Neighborhoods Committee at exactly the time when we're trying to reform how we do this partnership and get it done in a way that's going to survive the worst budget crisis that we've faced since the Great Depression. This crisis is this crisis on the heels of the audit that the Comptroller's Office did is giving an opportunity to those who really don't believe very much in neighborhood councils in the first place to try to cut the legs out from under you. And that's why I'm glad that I'm in the position that I'm in, because we can try to hold that tide back a little bit. And we have. Already you've seen the original plan that was rolled out by the CAOs. There was going to be a complete take of all of the rollover funds. There was going to be a reduction in the annual allocation. Some in council have said privately, if not publicly, let's just zero it out altogether. Let them go and raise their own funds. So far, we've had pretty good success in those areas. We've preserved the annual allocation. I think we have the mayor's commitment, I don't want to say commitment, but I think he's on the same page with us that the annual allocation needs to remain the same despite the budget crisis situation that we're facing. I think he sees that allocation provides great service to the city, and it would be a mistake to cut it back. On the rollover funds, 1.6 million, 100% of it was going to be swept back into the reserve. Instead of that, we were able to create a policy by which any of those rollover funds that were already intended to be used for a specific purpose that could be documented would be kept by the neighborhood councils, and so far we've been able to hang on to that, and that actually is a majority of that money. So that was a pretty good win too. So now we're going into this reorganization, I think many of you who've been to my committee have seen that we have been trying to go over all of the mayor's various proposals in this area with a fine-tooth comb, with the complete involvement of the community in a very transparent way. And my underlying philosophy on that is I'm not going to accept a reorganization plan just because it reduces the number of positions or number of bodies or a number of boxes on an organizational chart. I want to see us use this as an opportunity to reinvent how we administer the neighborhood councils and create a more effective system that realizes real budget savings. If it doesn't do either of those two things, it's not a good plan. And Sean, I have to thank you personally and all of the rest of you who have contributed to creating a positive win-win opportunity, I think, where we can actually achieve that. And I'm really glad to hear what you just said, because this is the first I've heard this most recent report.
I sent it to someone in your staff.
Okay. Well, what you just said about your meeting with the mayor was very encouraging. And so I think that gives us a lot of opportunity to really work on creating that kind of a win-win thing. And, you know, one of the best things I think about the work that all of you are doing in this area, whether it's in Budget LA or in reviewing the reorganization plan, is that it's really contributing vitality to this otherwise really negative discussion about the direction that the city is going in. Because let's say this is a horrible time for this city. And for those of us who have the responsibility of having to do these cuts and everything else, it's a horrible thing to have to experience. But when you are in that situation, for us to be able to go out to people who are viewing it with fresh eyes and, you know, trying to see a vision for a more positive way out, it's very uplifting for us. And I think this reorganization plan and the work that you've done on Budget LA and this budget reorg plan in particular is a great example of that, because I think if left to the bureaucrats and if left to you know, the mayor's office and the CAO, the result of this would not have been a reorganization that would have worked for neighborhood councils. And at least the proposal that was brought before us, I'm not convinced it would have even realized any budget savings. So where we are now is a great step ahead of where we were just a very short time ago. Now, Stephen said that some of the city attorney is in the land of no. I like that one because that I feel like I'm in that land quite a lot, and so being an attorney myself, I don't take the city attorney's advice on its face. And when they say, oh, you can't do that, I'm going to want to know, show me why. Tell me why, cite me to the authority that says why. Have you tried it yet? Has it been tested yet? Has anybody challenged it yet? You know, and if we don't go through that exercise, then we're never going to be able to make the kind of fundamental transitions that we really need to make to have a more positive and more effective partnership between the city and the neighborhood councils, and to get through this budget crisis. So with all of that, I just want to say thank you very much for having made that a possibility. And my main role as a council member and as the chair of this committee is, in my view, to be the vehicle through which you are able to implement change in our city. And so I'm mainly here not to talk to you, but to listen to you. I've already learned from you in the discussion that we've had so far, but I'm happy to take questions and comments. And so why don't we start with Sean?
Two quick things. And in terms of the allocation, there is still a little hubbub that the mayor wants us to take what he considers the shared sacrifice that everyone is taking. And something that I want to put out there that I think is really important, and that the idea of the cutting of Dunn down to 16 or whatever, that Dunn's budget is our budget, and that our funding of our programs can't be separated from that budget, and the cut of that budget is almost 35%, I think is what they're looking at. So I think it needs to be said when anyone comes at us to say take your shared sacrifice and a percentage of our own neighborhood council funding allocation to be cut. We've taken our fair sacrifice, and the fact that we've taken 35%, and I think it's a pretty good stance.
Much more than that. You've taken cuts in the annual allocation. You've had cuts now by losing a portion of the rollover funds.
Yeah.
Dunn has been cut 40% in the last 2 years. Now they're going to cut it another 50%.
Yeah.
That's a lot of sacrifice.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that some pushback on that is.
And I wanted to say about the rollover, and I'm not sure, perhaps you know the history, but it's still a real sticking point for us. Although you're saying that you were able to save some of this and allow us to take rollover if we had the proper paperwork on it. But the history, the way the rollover went for us, is that back in September, Dunn froze all of our rollover so that the audit could be done. At that point, anything that we had to pay came out of this year. So I have to still, not being an attorney, but I do question the legality of it, about taking funds that had been frozen that we weren't able to access. And I think it's a real sticking point for a lot of neighborhood councils. And the last that I heard from the city attorney is that there was not a statement at whether or not it actually was legal. And I think it's something that the city needs